you rejoined the Zeros
Right.
back in, what, 79?
That was summer 78.
78.
Yeah, and that whole...
And you did a tour?
Yeah. And that's why that whole car fiasco led up to getting back into the Zeros, you know, with Bob helping me get back to San Diego. And yeah, we started rehearsing, and then it was just a three-piece at that point. Robert didn't go back into the band. And then we drove, we played LA with the Furies. Michael L. Compton used to be the manager. He was a friend of ours. He went by a name like something Jet. I can't remember, but that was his punk name. Anyway, and then we went up to San Francisco and played in San Francisco. There was a guy named Ken Friedman there who wanted to manage us, and that's why we got this summer tour going on. It was maybe 4 or 5 gigs. It wasn't a lot. But Ken came with us on the road. We went to Portland, we played Seattle, then we backtracked and played San Francisco again and LA again on the way down. And that's how we got back together. And it was on that trip that we were like, we got to move to San Francisco, you know, because that was our third time playing in San Francisco.
And you liked it a lot? It was pretty happening?
It was
more than LA, or?
In a weird kind of way, yeah. You know, LA had the record labels and stuff, and I guess, you know, any intelligent musician would say, I'm going to stick in LA until I make it. But for whatever reason, we decided to go to San Francisco, and Ken Friedman lived there, and he was going to manage us, and so we were like going to work with him. Years later, many years later, Ken Friedman ended up being involved with London Records. And I think he had something to do with the Smiths, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think he was connected with those guys many years later.
So when did you play with The Clash?
That was February 79. We were managed by Peter Urban at the time, who also managed the Dills, Chip and Tony Kinman's band. And Peter wanted to start a group called the New Youth Group, which was basically for the, you know, reason was to open up an all ages venue because there weren't any in San Francisco at the time. He wanted to open up an all ages venue. He said, well, you know, let's raise some funds, let's make some money, let's get some bands playing, you know. So there was like this little group of people that would get together once a week and talk about the plans about New Youth Group. And on one of those meetings, we all knew the Clash were coming to the U.S. and that they were playing at the Berkeley Civic. Bo Diddley was opening. He was an opening act for the Clash. And somebody said in one of those meetings, I'm going to ask the Clash if they'll play for, you know, the New Youth Group and raise, you know, some money. You know, if they'll do a benefit. And we're all like, that's never going to happen. That sounds crazy. And they said, oh, well, I know Paul Simonon and I know, you know, Joe Strummer and blah, blah, blah. And we're like, I don't know. Let's see if this is true or not.
Wow.
And so the Clash come to town, right? And lo and behold, they show up at the meeting, Joe Strummer and Paul Simonon. And we're like, what the fuck? Like, yeah, we're going to help you guys out, you know. It's like, but we can't use the name of the Clash because they were under contract with Bill Graham.
Oh.
And so there was some clause that said you can't play within a 100-mile perimeter of my event. Mm-hmm. You know, so they said we're going to have to, you know, use another name or whatever. So we just took the slogan, the only band that matters or whatever it was they were calling themselves at the time. And so they played the night before at Berkeley with Bo Diddley opening up, and then the next day we were like, you know, the show started happening.
What do you remember about that?
It was at a synagogue that became a concert venue, the Temple Beautiful it was called, and Paul Ratt got the lease on that building. It had a huge stage. It was really massive, really big, almost like the observatory here in San Diego, you know, really big, and lots of gigs happened there. So that's where the event took place, and Peter organized it, and it was Negative Trend, the Zeros, and the Clash. And then Negative Trend got all rock star on everybody and said, "We don't want to be the opening band. We want to play in the middle." And we were like, "Wow, okay." We were all like, "Shit, we're playing with the Clash whether we open or not. Fucking, I'm happy to do whatever, man." I said, "Okay, yeah, that's fine. You guys be in the middle and we'll open up." And so what I remember was we used to have a friend, Tony Flattop, who passed away years ago. May he rest in peace. He was we used to call him Tony Zero because he was always hanging out and really loved the band, and we were really close. And so he had a Volkswagen Bug, and that day we went to the rehearsal space, got the equipment. He always pulled out the back seat and the passenger seat out of the Bug so we could put everything in there. And then I'd cram in on top of an amp and we'd go drop off the stuff, at the clubs. And so that day we were like driving over there, and we get to the Temple Beautiful. We walk in, and there's the Clash, right? Inside, in front of the stage. There's no seating or anything. It's just like this big open, wooden floor space. And they're kicking around a soccer ball, waiting for the equipment to get built on the stage, the amps and the sound man set up the mic stuff. And I'm like, oh, wow, what is that, And then Tony, my buddy, he just runs in there and starts kicking the ball with the guys, And I thought, oh, my God, what the fuck are you doing? And they were totally cool about it. They just, would kick it to him and they'd kick him back, and they were totally open to that. And so that said a lot about the band, To me, I was like, oh, they're pretty cool.
On a couple levels.
Yeah.
The fact that they would even play the gig when they technically weren't supposed to.
Yeah, right.
3 levels. Yeah, they weren't supposed to play the gig.
Yeah.
The fact that they even played the gig, being a big band.
Yeah.
I guess they were that big back then, right?
Oh, yeah, they were huge. That was their first time in the U.S., the first tour of the U.S. And so then I'm all like, okay, I'm going to go into the back dressing room and leave my bass guitar over there in the gig bag or whatever. I walk in there, and I'm just sort of hanging out for 5-10 minutes and kind of scoping out the place, and here walks in the band, one after another, all 4 guys, boo, 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 and I'm like, oh, shit. And here I am alone with these guys. What am I gonna? And I had a little jacket that had a Sandinista pin. Remember that Sandinista?
The triple
Salvador. That's way before the album.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
But there was the soul rebel movement in El Salvador with the Sandinistas, and I had this little pin. Their emblem was a red triangle next to a black triangle, sort of, one on top of the other, kind of. And then Joe Strummer totally caught it. He goes, "Oh, hey, I really like that pin, and he knew what it was. So, "Oh, thanks, man, yeah, And I was like, oh, so I took it off. I said, "Here, man, I'm going to give it to you." And he's like, "Oh, no, I can't take it." I said, "No, it's just a gift, please." I'm just being cool, with him. And he goes, "Oh, thank you very much." And then that was it. And then I left. I was like, "Oh, I got to get out of here." Too much. It's too much. So I left him in the dressing room. And then the show starts, right? I think it was like 3,500 people showed up. It was crazy. Yeah, it was packed. And
how many people did you play to, being the first band?
To that many.
Really?
It was already packed. It was already practically sold out.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
sometimes the opening band gets the shaft.
Well, here's the funny part. The irony of all of this band lineup was that we went on first. So all these people, we got off stage, and then the Clash decided to go in the middle. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So they go play. No. And then when they're done and Negative Trend setting up,
everyone leaves.
It just empties out. Oh, God.
I was like, wow, how did that worked out so well for you?
Well, yeah. And I don't know if the Clash thought maybe that would be a good move to avoid somebody from the Graham people showing up and when they're supposed to be playing.
Wow.
Play earlier.
Oh,
I don't know.
God, that's funny.
It was really funny. I remember that.
Could you imagine if you were in that middle spot? It would have.
Karma, baby.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
That was the crazy part.
So I find it interesting. Well, I guess the Zeros, you had a bunch of singles, but you never had a full-length album out till the 90s, which is a good 14 years after, 15 years after you started.
Through time and conversations, I found out certain things
Is it something you can talk about? Or?
Of course, yeah.
Okay,
well, apparently, when Greg Shaw had given us, the opportunity to press 2 singles, he wanted an album back then. And Mr. Javier Escobedo, told him that we weren't ready. Now, this being back in 77, 78, I didn't find out about this situation until maybe 5 years ago.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, and that became a pattern with Javier, where he would make decisions without asking everybody else in the band or not even bringing it up. And it's like, well, dude, I mean, maybe you don't want to do it, but maybe we want to do it. And, we have to...
Yeah, be a team sometimes.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that's the pattern that has existed in the Zeros for many, many, many years, to the point where, there was an interesting question that my friend Anthony Ledesic, who's actually the director of the Zeros documentary about to come out, hopefully before
I was, do we want to jump into that now? Or okay, because I didn't know I was going to try and go in chronological order.
No, you can do chronological.
If it's going to flow better, I don't know.
But he did bring it up a while back when we started working on documentary, and it was my turn to get interviewed. He goes, he says, I never understood why have the Zeros never been as big as the Go-Go's or the whatever, Germs or whatever. Yeah. And I said, well, let me tell you why. Because somebody went out of his way to make sure that wasn't the case. And and so he understood, because through the making of the documentary, he encountered that behavior.
And that's why it didn't happen. I guess you know what? I guess we'll get back to that in the future when we get, if you have time. Are you okay on time and everything? Do you need anything? Or,
no, I'm good. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so this is we're talking about the Zeros. So Greg Shaw wanted to put out an album, and it got nixed.
Yeah, which again it was.
No, you didn't know.
We didn't know until many years later. The same thing with when we reunited as a 3-piece. It was back in around 2009 when we started playing really actively again.
And we played our bachelor party.
Yeah, and
we got married the next day.
Yeah, and that's when Mario Escobedo was managing us for 2 years, and I'll tell you, it was the best 2 years we ever had because of Mario.
Really?
He did an amazing job as a manager, everything.
And he booked you some good club shows and everything. Yeah, festival shows.
He was getting us all those music conferences, like up in Toronto. We did East by South by Northeast, and Iggy Pop was the big name for that 3-day event. South by Southwest, North by Northwest up in Portland. He was giving us all these high exposure situations. And, he was really good with guarantees and fair on every level. He was amazing, Mr. Javier Escobedo, unfortunately, is somewhat self-destructive. And it affects the band.
Do you? Well, I guess we might talk a little bit about that now. Why do you think he's so? Is it just his personal nature, or is he trying to? The punk rock thing would be to take the money while you can, being a bunch of misfits.
Right. I believe that it's more of destructive control than no control at all, in the sense that when things start getting really good for the band, I think he feels like he has no control over it. And so if somebody else comes in and wants to make it better, he prefers to back off and take a shit on it, so to speak, and feel that he still has control over it, even if it's like, remember Snidely Whiplash? Do you remember that cartoon character?
Yes.
With the mustache and the top.
Yes.
He fucks things up and he goes, ha ha ha. Yeah. And Javier has that kind of personality where he actually gets a kick out of doing that.
I don't think he would get a kick out of it.
Well, I mean, it's weird.
Well, you know him more better than me, but I know him pretty well too. But
no, unfortunately, it's been the problem for the Zeros on having more notoriety and success because believe me, we've been the luckiest band in the world. Things just fall on our lap.
Yeah,
when we
existed. Clash gig,
like the Clash gig. We opened up for Devo back in '77 at the Starwood.
Oh, well, what do you remember about that show? Going back, sorry, I don't mean to get.
No, there's nothing. No. Well, we were the band Devo that had traveled to Hollywood from Ohio. I believe they were from Ohio. First time around, and they were basically just exposing themselves to the LA scene, and they had 8mm screen and an 8mm camera, film camera, projector, and they're very into their art and all that crazy stuff they did. And immediately everybody liked them, because they were just different and wacky and fun and cool. And then we made friends with them on that first time around. We weren't best friends, but I told them we liked everything they did and they were cool. And then the second time around, when they came out, it was to basically because they were signing to Warner Brothers the second time around they came out to do the business end, and they got two nights at the Starwood. And I don't know how we ended up on that bill, but we were one of the bands. We played both nights.
Did you meet them? Were they a bunch of weirdos? Or
no, Mark Mothersbaugh was geeks? Cool, and the other guys were pretty cool guys. We didn't really bother them much, but they were pretty down to earth. As a matter of fact, Mark Mothersbaugh was interviewed for the upcoming documentary. Wow. He's going to be talking about.
So that documentary is happening.
Oh yeah.
Okay, we'll get that as we continue. Okay.
For a moment there, it didn't seem like it was, but it's happening now.
Okay.
Come hell or high water.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. That'll be excellent. So playing Devo, and then albums in the '90s.
Right.
What did you do during the '80s?
When the Zeros moved to San Francisco September '78, and by August '80 we broke up.
78, and then by 80, so a year.
August '80 we broke up. Yeah. So practically almost 2 years later.
Yeah.
And Javier was like, "I'm breaking up the band. I'm moving to Austin." So he moved to Austin, and then Baba stayed behind for a little bit, and then Bob and I were hanging out, and Bob introduced me to this cat named Richard Chase, who was originally from Imperial Beach, but he moved to San Francisco, and he was an amazing guitar player. This guy could play you anything. He was like a human jukebox, seriously. And it was impressive, He could play Segovia, he could play Wes Montgomery, he could play Jimmy Page, you name it, and he was good at everything. And I thought, oh my God, I got to get better. So this guy's like over here, and I'm over here. I got to get up there. But him and Bob and I started playing together, and it was really fun. And then Baba decided, I'm going to move to Austin too. So he left. And so Richard and I stayed together. And then we wrote a lot of songs together, about 20 songs during a period of time. And then we were like, let's get a band together and see how they sound with a full band. And then we created Flying Color. That was the band I had from 82 through 87.
Oh, okay.
And it was a very Raspberry, Badfinger, Beatles, Big Star sounding band. But we were very, very dedicated to rehearsal schedule, to harmonies, to everything.
So what did you learn during that whole period? How to play better, or?
I learned how to pay attention to guitar hooks and melodic hooks and harmonize. And I mean, I was the bass player and singer too, so I had to do both, and how to listen to your fellow band members when they have ideas, because Richard had a lot of great ideas, and then Dale Duncan came into the band too, and he was a really great songwriter, so the three of us were always pumping out songs and trying out ideas and stuff. But we were really dedicated. I mean, we were tight, to the point where we ended up putting out a single in '85 for a little label called Cryptovision out of New Jersey. And the guy, Dave Amos, was the owner. He was a musician, keyboard guy, and he was working for Nady Wireless Systems in Berkeley at the time. I think they were in Berkeley or Oakland or somewhere. And so he caught wind of us at a gig, and he goes, I want to put out a single with you guys. You know, so I said, all right, put out a single. And then we went to Tom Allen's studio. He had a 16-track reel-to-reel, and we did 5 songs for the 45, and then we would pick the 2 that we wanted out there. And then Tom Allen liked what he heard, and he said, I'm starting a label called Grifter. You guys want to be the first band on my label, put out a full album. And we're like, what the hell? Just like that, And then by that time, Cryptovision wanted to put out a full album too. So then we had 2 offers for 2 albums, and we're like, wow, okay. And I kept saying, well, let's do an album with that guy and an album with that guy. What's the problem? But then Dale was like, oh, we should just work with Tom. He's in San Francisco, blah, blah, blah. It's like, come on, man, what's the problem? It'd be great to release 2 records at once. And so we settled for Tom. But then Cryptovision said, well, if Flying Color won't put out an album, why don't you put out a solo album? So he gave me the solo album. So I ended up, and it's really a Flying Color record because the drummer and Richard are on that all over the place. Dale's the only one not on it. So,
well, that's what I was going to ask you. You said there was 3 of you working together.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of give and take when you have totally. 3 people like each other?
Yeah, we make suggestions, or we'd be pretty honest with each other. Say, I don't know about that part. You got to, maybe change it, or try this or try that. And everybody seemed to be very open-minded, which is important. Nobody got offended. It was we all knew we were doing it for a
common goal.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I was watching the Get Back, the Beatles Get Back thing, and it was like Paul McCartney's coming up with riffs, and he's playing riffs, and he's playing riffs. And it's like, oh, I thought this stuff came naturally. I didn't know he worked at it.
Oh yeah, you got to work at it.
So, what did you think of the Get Back documentary?
Honestly, I haven't really seen it all the way through.
Really?
No, I haven't.
Wow, you of all people.
I played.
You're busy.
Beatle band for 20 years. I think that's the last thing I want to do.
Really?
No, but seriously, I will watch it.
See how it works.
I will watch it. Yeah. I hear it's really great.
I thought it was fan. I'm not even the biggest Beatles fan. Right. I mean, I respect them. I like them and stuff. But watching that, I was like, oh wow.
Yeah.
I'm a fan. It sees them. Well, it sees them as real people. Mm-hmm. It doesn't see them as these
celebrities,
gods.
Yeah.
Not even celebrities, gods.
Gods. Yeah. Right.
No, they're like real people. They're having real problems. There are little fights here and there. And
they're a very unique group of guys. I mean, they were in each other's pocket for 13 years maybe, since because Lennon and McCartney and Harrison, they knew each other when they were kids. Both of those guys were friends since they were really little, and they were together for a long time. And they just grew up out of being a band, and that's why they went solo. And at some point, they had to go different directions. And that's just normal, I think.
Which I guess we find out with the Zeros and stuff like that. Everyone going separate things. Robert having Elvez, and you doing.
So that's what happened. I was doing that with Flying Color, and then Flying Color, we ended up putting out the record with Grifter, and what happened was Tom Allen. We spent almost 10 months making that record, right? It was a long time. And it was a 16-track, 2-inch Tascam reel-to-reel and all this fancy equipment. And Tom was a stickler for production. I mean, it got frustrating many times because he'd want us to do the same song over and over. And I remember one time we got to the point where we were doing one song 27 takes in a row. And I was like, this isn't going to work. We're just going through the motions now. You got to capture the energy. So then we had a meeting a few days later, the band, and we said, okay, we got to gang up on Tom and say, hey, we're going to do 3 takes, no more, and take it or leave it. And we got together with him, and he was okay with that. So we were able to get rid of that whole repetitive, not wasting our time. But Tom at the time was also recording Chris Isaac's first album. And that's what was bringing him the money, because Chris Isaac had just been signed to Warner Brothers. So we had to work around Chris Isaac's schedule, because Tom was basically letting us record for free, Yeah. It was on his dime, in his place. And so we finally got the record done, And after spending 10 months and all this, if you add all the time that he did and what it amounted to money-wise, I thought, that's a lot of money, So I said, well, how many copies are you gonna press? He goes, oh, I'll start with 1,500. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's in 3 months. So then I called Lisa Fancher from Frontier because I knew her and John, her boyfriend, who ended up managing, I think, Urge Overkill and a whole bunch of other bands in the future. But and I just called them for advice. I wasn't looking for a deal. I said, hey, I have questions. This is what we did, and he only wants to do this much units. What should I do? And then Lisa Fancher said, send me an acetate. So I sent her an acetate. 4 days later, she calls me up, goes, I want to put this out. I wasn't going for that, but it happened, and I thought, man, this is crazy. And Frontier already had 8 years of being a label, and they had, I think, EAIO and Red Cross and all these other bands on their labels, and so I thought, man, this is even better than Grifter, but Grifter owned the masters because it was on his dime. So I said, well, you got to talk to Tom. Maybe you guys can work a split label, and then Tom was okay with that. But Tom, at the same time, had a band called American Music Club, and he was the drummer, and he had to piggyback his band on our deal. Oh. And so, and what really frustrated me was that we got Grifter Frontier, and American Music Club ended up on RCA. Oh, geez. And I said, dude, wait a minute, that should have been us, motherfucker. Yeah. I was pissed for a while. But what are you gonna do? And so, Lisa put it out, and she already had experience with a connection with all the college radios around the country, and said, hey, I want you guys to wait till all the colleges are back in session so we can give these records to the, not the substitute DJs, but the ones that are there for the semesters, and stuff. And so we waited, and then we did a 6-week tour of the U.S., and we were supporting the Bodines, who on that tour, somehow they were playing with U2. Yeah. So when they didn't play with U2, supporting U2, they'd have headlining gigs, and then we'd be the supporting act for the Bodines, which is really crazy. And we did that for like 6 weeks, But with Flying Color, we got to open up for the Ventures at the I-Beam, and that was like a big feather in my hat because I was a big Ventures fan. I thought, oh my God, I can't believe this. And then we opened up for Smokey Robinson in Missoula, Montana at the University.
Wow, any memories of Ventures and any memories of Smokey Robinson?
Oh my God. I was just real excited that they were my guitar heroes, I mean, yeah. I was like, I always said, the Beatles inspired me to be a musician, but the Ventures taught me how to play, because I used to play the records, So I was thrilled to be on that bill, I didn't bother them again, just kind of shook their hand and said, oh, you guys, you are the guys that got me here, and they were, oh, thank you, they were cool,
Well, I guess this leads me to another question I was going to ask later, but I'll ask it now for the flow of things.
Yeah.
You don't seem to get starstruck.
No, because I do, but I don't. I hide it well. Okay. That's what I do. I'm like, because I always think, they probably get that all the time. I don't want to be that person that, could be another one of those.
But I can tell your enthusiasm when you're telling the story.
So I gotta play it cool. I think celebrities appreciate that more because they don't feel like, oh my God, this guy's.
What would you do if you ever met Paul McCartney?
I can't say it on the recorder. But seriously, no, that would be amazing. That would be amazing. I did meet his son, James.
Oh, okay.
He played at the House of Blues way back in 2012. And he didn't even play the main stage. He played one of those off rooms. And I saw when the reader was getting printed back in the day, way at the bottom in the tiniest letters, James McCartney on a Monday night. And I'm like, what the fuck? This is Paul McCartney's son? And he's like, no advertising practically.
Wow.
So I went down there. 100 people were there.
Really?
And he had the most amazing band. That kid can play. Obviously, his dad's McCartney. Great songs, playing piano on one, guitar on the other, just rocking out. and he was very humble. Did a greet and meet, and of course, there's all these people with Beatle items.
Poor guy.
He's not in the Beatles for It's just, anyways. What are you drinking there?
This is a Hamilton West Indies blend. Do you want some?
I'll try a little bit.
Okay. You want a little bit or
just a little shot?
Turn on downstairs light.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. But yeah, you know.
Sip it. Just wet your lips with it because it's a little overproof.
Okay.
We gave someone a shot of this once, and
pretty yummy.
He tried to drink it as a shot, and he would spit it out all over the place.
Yeah, it's delicious. Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah,
there's more if you want it.
Yeah. But yeah, and then he played again at the Coach House in San Clemente, but it was just him with an electric guitar, and I expected the whole band, you know. And we met him there as well, and you know, Nico and I took pictures with him, and I told him, I said, man, I really, really love your music, you know. And it's like, I really dig your CDs. And he was so humble, you know. It was crazy. This kid goes, really? Like he thought I was making it. Dude, you're fucking James McCartney, man.
But did he know who you are?
No, he didn't know who I am.
You're a fellow musician,
I was
so
just
you know what you're talking about.
I was just a fan there.
Yeah.
And he really was surprised by that. I mean, poor kid. I mean, you know, think about it. You got your dad's Paul McCartney. How does that equate in your existence?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Do you think his talent is hereditary, or because you said, he is Paul McCartney's son, or did you have to learn it? I mean, Paul. You have to.
I think he absorbed it to a degree. I mean, being around his dad during recording sessions of Wings or whatever, you know, or because he took the family on tours and stuff at one point. They were touring with him, you know. I think that had a lot to do with it, and because also
it does take work. I mean, you gotta practice.
And also, I mean, take into consideration that Paul's dad was a musician in the 20s and 30s. He was in like a kind of like these sort of little swing band things, you know, in England. So yeah, the music sort of runs in the family, you know, for those.
But yeah, Wolfgang Van Halen says, you know, it's like, you know, people ask him if he was intimidated playing guitar. He goes, fuck yeah, my dad was Eddie Van Halen. What can I do?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
But you know what? He can do it. He can do it. So maybe it is hereditary. I don't know.
That's the thing. And, you know, I mean, speaking of Beatle kids, I mean, I've seen Danny Harrison twice, and I saw him at the Casbah, of all places.
Oh, wow.
It was amazing. The ticket price was worth every penny because he had his dad's guitars on stage, which was totally crazy.
Yeah. So you would have paid that just to see that.
I walked in, I'm going,
even if he didn't play.
I was like, what the fuck? He's got the Rocky guitar and the fucking Hard Day's Night 12-string over there, the Rickenbacker. Like, huh?
Wow.
Seriously, that was it. I was like, fuck, this is cool. And then I saw him at the Belly Up, and both times he was really great. Yeah, I really like the Beatle kids. I call it Here Come the Suns.
They should do that.
Right.
They should tour like that. Yeah, why not?
But they're all great in their own right, man. And I have all their CDs, and you know, they're a continuing legacy of the Beatles, and whether you like it or not. But one thing I noticed was that a lot of the really older Beatle fans who were teenagers when the Beatles were around in the early '60s, they don't really acknowledge the kids, you know, because I think it reminds them that, hey, I'm old. I think that's what it is.
Really?
Because I've asked many Beatle fans at the Beatle Fair, you know, or those Baja Bugs gigs, have you heard any songs? No. Have you listened to James McCartney? No. I'm like, why? You don't know what you're missing, man. They're great. They're really catchy tunes, really great songwriters. But anyways, enough of that.
So enough of the Beatles, which we'll get back to later.
No pun intended. Well, first we got to come together.
Yeah. Oh boy. You got a bunch of them. Okay.